Welcome to today's webinar. We will begin in just a moment when everyone has had a chance to enter the virtual room. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on signage guidance, enhancing transparency of federally funded projects through the use of public signage. Before we get started on today's content, we'd like to go over a few housekeeping items to ensure everyone knows how to participate with the Zoom platform. If you'll take your mouse and scroll over the bottom of your screen, the Zoom toolbar will appear. First of all, in the lower left-hand corner is the mute button. Attendees are in listen-only mode unless they are unmuted by the host. Second is the chat feature. Attachments, messages, and information from our panelists will show here. Third is the raised hand feature. If you prefer to provide your comments verbally, please raise your hand and then you will be unmuted when prompted by the host. Fourth is the Q&A feature. Throughout today's presentation, please enter your questions into the Q&A feature so they can be answered during the question portion of today's webinar. Finally, fifth is the leave button. If you need to leave at any time today, simply click the leave button. And if you click on the CC button, you will see today's transcripts. If you would like to have closed captioning enabled. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Rural Development Chief of Staff, Stephanie Bezrucki. Stephanie?
Hey, thank you, Maggie. I'm so very happy to be here to talk about rural development's key role in building America's infrastructure and also our responsibility to inform the public about how we're making all of this possible. I was genuinely excited to be able to come talk about this new signage initiative because I feel like this is just an incredible opportunity to showcase all of the work that rural development has done, especially over the last 2 to 3 years. So the goal for today's training, though, this is to provide you with information about how rural development is going to implement this new voluntary signage policy. So you're going to be introduced to the new RD instruction, all of the covered programs and projects, roles and responsibilities of implicated RD staff, the RD centralized reporting process, and what resources are available to you and who your best points of contact are going to be. But before we go any further, I would like to provide you with some background to give a little bit of context about this new initiative. Next slide. Over the past 2 years, 3 historic pieces of legislation have been signed into law by President Biden, and these are deeply rooted in the administration's commitment to rural America and improving its infrastructure. First, I'm sure as many of you remember, this historic American Rescue Plan Act, which assisted rural hospitals and local communities in responding to COVID-19 and also making investments that improve healthcare outcomes in rural communities. This legislation also allowed rural development to make new investments that strengthen our food supply chain through programs like, for example, the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Act. The second important piece of legislation, that's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This has invested billions of dollars in rural communities across the country through now delivering affordable high-speed internet in the Reconnect program. Third, this is the Inflation Reduction Act. Rural development has been given a pivotal role in implementation of this law, IRA, as it's commonly referred to. That this builds on, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build critical infrastructure, reduce energy costs for families, and create thousands of good-paying jobs for people all across rural America. I know that many of you are still learning and digging into these exciting new programs, but I think we can all agree on the value that these new loan and grant products are going to bring as far as helping rural communities expand clean energy and transforming our power production and just spurring general economic growth. So as a key participant in the delivery of these programs and services under these 3 laws, rural development also has a responsibility to be accountable and transparent to the public about the availability of these important investments and where that money's going. In February, OMB issued new guidance which encourages federal agencies to promote that transparency by ensuring that there was clear and prominent signage for projects funded in whole or in part by these three historic legislative landmarks. And this voluntary signage policy, which we're rolling out today at Rural Development, this is our response to that directive. And I'll be blunt with this group. When this directive first came out in February, frankly, I felt a little overwhelmed. The idea of getting out new signage for our projects, especially given where we were in implementation, it felt a little daunting. Rural development, as I see it, has already done the impossible. It can sometimes feel like we look at how much we've accomplished over the last 2.5 years. And now this was something new. It was actually some of the other leaders here at Rural Development who helped me see this opportunity and gave me some perspective. We gathered a group of our program leadership, some of the state directors, Office of External Affairs, the Innovation Center, and the new Office of State Operations. And together, we developed a strategy for signage that we really felt like was going to be the best strategy for rural development. You all know this, rural development is different. And this approach is going to be different than, for example, what NRCS is doing. And I'm sure it's going to be different than what some of the other federal agencies like Department of Transportation is going to do when it comes to signage. And as I see it, that's a good thing, because the priority was around implementing this in a way that works for our staff and works for our customers. And at the end of the day, this signage is another tool to help showcase your hard work and the impact that rural development is making in rural communities across the country. I'm going to need your help to make this successful, though. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here today and to learn more about this instruction. Before I hop off, I want to thank the Innovation Center for taking the lead and working across RD to develop this guidance and processes. I also want to extend my thanks to State Operations Office, who's volunteered to coordinate collection of signage information and other reporting. And also a big thank you to Office of External Affairs and Office of General Counsel, who were critical in some of the early conversations earlier this spring. And then lastly, thank you to the agencies and the state offices who have provided input and feedback and also shared experiences about how you've seen similar initiatives go in the past. All of this has been invaluable in creating this new guidance and preparing for this webinar today. So again, thanks for being here, and I'll now turn it over to Michelle Brooks, the Director of Regulations Management Division.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. The RD Instruction 2006 TT, which was issued on July 3rd, 2023, and updated on July 12th, 2023, provides all of the basic information regarding roles and responsibilities for implementation of the voluntary signage policy. It supplements the USDA's Investing in America signage guidelines for signs displayed at these project sites. Just a reminder, if you had downloaded the earlier version of the instruction, please be sure to go back to the RD website and download the most recent version. It was also sent out by Newsbox on July 12th. So we want to make sure everyone is using the most current version. Posting signage is voluntary for all recipients receiving awards through ARPA, BIL, and IRA funding. Signage is a reimbursable cost, and we have established a maximum threshold of $10,000 depending on the type of award and the type of project and the number of signs. USDA has established a style guide, which contains the approved template for USDA funded projects. A link is available in the instruction and on the RD signage data SharePoint site, which you will see later. Next slide. This slide shows an easy-to-use chart that identifies the covered programs funded by each of the applicable funding sources. The RD instruction also includes the list of applicable programs that are covered by the voluntary signage policy. I want to spotlight two particular programs: the Indigenous Animals Harvesting Meat Processing Grant Program, known as IAG, and the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program, MPEP, both which are funded by ARPA. These two programs are unique in that from the other programs because they are being administered and serviced by other organizations through cooperative agreements. Gail Hoskinson will address in a few moments how those are being handled. Next slide. We're approaching the communication of the voluntary signage notification and guidelines to our customers from two avenues. For projects that have already been awarded, RD agencies will notify awardees via notification letter that will include the information related to the voluntary signage policy. Future loan and grant applicants will be notified of the voluntary signage policy through announcement of the applicability in the publication of the notices of funding opportunity in the Federal Register or on grants.gov. RD agencies will include information related to approved costs for signage in the initial offer letter or letter of conditions to potential awardees. The letter should include the amount available for signage, the number of approved signs, and the USDA style guidance website link, which is provided as a reference in the PowerPoint presentation. Now over to Gail to talk about the internal roles, responsibilities, and other important information.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. The State Operations Office appreciates our collaboration with the Innovation Center to implement these new signage requirements established by the department. This slide outlines the roles and responsibilities regarding answering questions from customers and staff, as well as responsibilities for reporting. The general field representatives and state program staff will be responsible for responding to questions from recipients regarding the signage. They will also be responsible for collecting data and reporting using the tracker that we're going to be demonstrating later in this training. An exception, as mentioned earlier, is for the Indigenous Animals Harvesting and Meat Processing Grant Program and the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program. There are external entities who have a cooperative agreement to administer these programs with RBCS. And for these types of projects, the external entity will actually be responsible for answering questions and reporting on the signage. The management operations officers in the State Operations Office will be available to answer questions internally from staff, and we will be responsible for collecting data from the tracker and reporting monthly to the department. The management operations officers are Sharon Roach, Jennifer Stevenson, and myself. Next slide, please. The implementation of this process includes a separate process for existing awards and for new awards. And the existing awards are those that have been obligated and loan and grant documents have already been issued to the recipients. And this slide outlines the steps in the process for existing awards. So beginning around August 1st, letters will be mailed to the existing recipients. And then the GFR or the state representative will contact the recipient to confirm that the recipients, to confirm their signage plans, the number of signs, when they plan to put them up, or if they opt out or don't plan to put up signs. Step 3 is the GFR or SFR will discuss any project budget modifications necessary for that signage cost. And the note here says signage costs are anticipated to be primarily be covered through the project contingency because the project has already been obligated. GFR or state field representatives will follow up with the recipient to determine applicable reporting information by project. And then they will report the signage as signs are put up through that tracking tool that will be demonstrated here in a minute. And then they also conduct periodic follow-ups with the recipient until all the planned signs are accounted for. Next slide, please. For the new awards that are yet to be obligated, there's a pre-award and a post-award process. For the pre-award, the funding opportunity announcement will include language encouraging voluntary display of signage and allowing reimbursement of the signage costs. The awardee will identify funding for signage in the project budget request as part of their application. And then their offer letter will include the amount and number of approved signs. The GFR on the post-award side, the GFR and the state representative or the cooperator in those instances that we mentioned earlier will contact the recipient to confirm the recipient signage plans. And then they will report that project signage as the signs are put up through the tracking tool. And the cooperator in those cases of those special projects will provide their reports to us in the state operations office. And then again, conducting periodic follow-ups with the recipients until all the planned signs are accounted for and put up. Next slide, please. This is where we will go to the live demo, and a recording is going to be provided here to do that demo. So I'll turn it back over to, I think, Maggie. Thank you.
We'll be pulling that up and displaying it right now. Thank you, Gail.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be sharing my screen and doing a live demonstration of the RD signage tools that are available for you. So we're going to start by, by reviewing the SharePoint site that is available. This houses both the field data collection tool, some reference materials, and a visualization along with some information about our points of contact, and we will also store our snapshots of the results as our month and quarter ends occur. So I'm going to start by launching the signage data collection application. You can do that in two ways. Either click here to launch, or under the reference materials, you can click this icon as well. So I'll click to launch, and it's going to pop up a new window. You'll see here that this is the landing page, and it gives you a list of the projects that are funded through the IRA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the American Rescue Plan Act. So these are all of the projects that are going to be included in this portion of our training. You can always go to the Help Topics icon over here on the top right-hand corner. If you click this button, it will, eventually there will be a link to this recording. You'll also be able to navigate to these reference materials that are also available on the SharePoint site, or navigate back to the SharePoint site or the data visualization. If you have a question about the signage reporting, you have here the email for the management operations officers. I'm going to click back to go back to the landing page, and the next portion is going to be talking about how to find a project or a borrower and submit a report. I'll be going through a couple of different scenarios. One where you submit a new report with a sign, a new report without a sign, a new report where a project or borrower has opted out, or how to modify an existing report. So to do any of those four, you will click on the screen button to find borrowers and submit a report. That's going to bring you into the next screen. You'll see very briefly a warning sign. Just give it a second for it to query the data and load. So this screen is, and I will caution you to say that I would like to caution everyone and say that the data that you see available currently is for illustration purposes only. It is test data and will be deleted after this training is completed. But here we wanted to give you an idea of what it will look like when a report has been submitted. So you can navigate to if you know the name of a specific borrower that you want to submit a report for, you can use this borrower name field and you can start searching. So let's say that it's a hospital. You can start searching, you can start typing the name hospital, and it will filter down to all of the hospitals that we have available. Let's say that you know it's a hospital and you know that it's in a specific state. Let's go to, we see the first one, there is Washington. Here are all of the hospitals that are in Washington. Conversely, if you know the state that your project or borrower is located in, and you don't know the name, you can search for you can filter to all of the projects that are here in Washington. Once you've selected a state in this filter portion, you can also then filter by county. or by city. And these are dynamic. So if you're looking at a state and you don't see a specific county or city, that's because we don't have a project listed for that. The source of this project data is our obligation data or our investment data. And so that data is refreshed on a weekly basis. So all of that information is pre-populated in here. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a second. You could also filter by a specific agency, a program area, or the program that project is specifically receiving funds from. So let's reset these filters really quickly. You'll see that, as I said, the state and county, the county and city filters are grayed out until you select a specific state. I'm going to go to Ohio because there's a specific example that I want to talk about here. And then let's filter down. Before I do that, we're going to go ahead and talk about submitting a new report. So let's say that we have a report here for Adams County Regional Medical Center, and we know that we need to submit a report for it. Once you've found it using the search or filters, you then select using that icon right here, and it's going to open up a new window. This is the report submission window. You'll see here that pre-populated in the top half are a number of different variables, including the borrower information, location, the investment type, the initiative, the agency, the address, and other information. You will see project ID, the total obligation amount, the number of obligations, and the year of that obligation. There are some scenarios, one of which I will review in a minute, where there are more than one obligation for a project ID. In that case, you'll see some information that will give you a pop-up to show you the total number of obligation or the detail about those obligations. Once you've confirmed using this information that this is the project that you want to submit a report for, you need to fill out the fields down here. Anything with a star is a required field. Once all of the required fields are complete, this will turn green and you can then submit the report. If you have additional questions about these fields, you can, of course, hover over them to get a little bit more data or a little bit more detail about each of those fields, or you can select this field info icon up here, and that gives you a description of the fields here for the fields that you need to fill out. So let's go through each of these. So let's do a scenario where a sign is present. I'm going to say yes. It's then going to ask you to put in the number of signs. This has to be a whole number. So for example, if you were to inadvertently type 1.5, it's going to give you an error and say whole numbers only. So we'll delete that 0.5. This one has one sign. Then you need to determine or select whether it's been reimbursed by RD or not. In this case, it is. And again, this is test data. So the date that the sign was identified, so that isn't today's date unless you've just confirmed that that sign is present. You cannot also select a date into the future because you can't travel to the future. If you could, you would probably be doing something something else with your time. So let's say that I did this this report with this sign was confirmed on Friday. We'll select last Friday the 7th. Once you've selected that, you do need to click the OK button here. Otherwise, if you just click out, it's not going to take that selection. So when you select the date, make sure that you select the date. It changes up here, and then click OK. Once you've done that, you'll see that this has been populated. Those are technically all the things that you need to fill out. So you could submit a report now. It will pull in the date that you're submitting this report and your email automatically. If, however, I know that this city is, maybe the sign is actually in a different location, you can modify the primary city location or hopefully the state location and county location are correct. But if you need to make a change to any of these fields, you can type that in here. Now, it won't change the information that's listed up here, but it will be copied and reflected in reporting. Also, any comments that you might have about this project. In this case, I'm going to write that it's test data and we are not to use it. So this will be deleted again after this training. So I've entered my comments. I've confirmed that the city, state, and county locations that are pre-populated are correct. I'm going to go ahead and submit this report. So now that this was submitted, you can go back to the app home, you can submit another report, or you can finish and exit. Of course, you can see that all the information that we filled out was selected here. I'm now going to go ahead and submit another report, and we're going to do the next one for Amplex electricity. But in this case, there aren't going to be any signs. So we'll assume that this is all correct. We're not going to have any signs. The number of signs will then come in to be 0. Of course, there's no reimbursement available, and no date that the signs are identified. Really, the only thing that you can do once you select no is you can determine whether or not it's an opt-out. If the borrower chooses to no longer to not participate in the signage program and they no longer want to be contacted, you can select opt-out, and you can add any additional comments that you want. So let's go ahead and say that we, if we want to modify this, you can clear the selection, or you can just change it to yes. So if you want to change it to yes, you see that that opt-out button disappears, and then you could fill out that information. We're going to go ahead and select no again, and then we'll pick this opt-out. Let's say that they are opting out because this is test data, do not use, but the opt-out reason is because it is equipment only, for example, and there's no reason to put a sign up for this project. So we can go ahead and submit that report. If they're not opting out, you can, of course, leave it as no and then modify it later if something changes. We'll go ahead and submit that report. And then we'll go back to submit another report. So the next scenario that we're going to talk about is changing an existing report. So you can see that this report was submitted early in late June. This again, test data that'll be deleted at the end of this training. But let's say that we have additional information that we need to update this report for. You can see that because a report has been submitted, the results of that report are displayed here. We can go ahead and modify that by selecting that report. And let's go ahead and say that actually it wasn't 2 signs. Let's say it was really only 1 sign, and we confirmed that on June 30th. We're just a little bit late in updating that record. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Primary city location, state, and county are all fine. We've confirmed that the signs are present. The number, they're still reimbursed. We've updated the date those signs were identified. I did mention earlier that some projects have multiple obligations associated with them. So this is an example of one of those projects. If you want to look at the specific obligations that make up the total obligation amount, you click this View Obligations icon, and it will show you the obligation IDs, the amounts, the dates of those obligations, and the total amount of that obligation. So we'll go ahead and close that pop-up and then submit the updated report here. So we go ahead and submit the report. We see that the number of signs changed was 1. Let's go back and just validate that, okay, we see here that this, the data that's now displayed here for this report is now reflecting our updated data. So if you want to reset your filters, you can do that thusly. Otherwise, that includes our review of the RD signage data collection tool. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat window, or we're able to answer those questions for you. I'm now going to go back to the signage data SharePoint site and briefly do a review of some of the data visualizations that are available for this project. Now, again, this is test data only. When we clear this out, it's going to look pretty empty until we start getting reports, actual reports submitted through the tool. Here, there are two tabs to this report. There's the signage summary and a data detail page. I'm going to start with the signage summary. You can see that there are 5 filters here that you're able to apply at the top. You can change the agency, the initiative, the program label, or the project state. So let's say that we want to look at Ohio. We can change, we select this filter, it's going to filter down to data for only that state that we've selected. You can see the number of eligible projects, the number for which we have had reports submitted by the field, the number of those reports or number of those projects that have signs, the projects that do not have any signs, and the total number of signs for these projects. You see 2 percentage KPIs, which is the percentage of projects reported. That's this value over the eligible projects. And then the percent of projects with signs is projects with signs over eligible projects. You can see detail by the initiative project, and then over here by state and program. I'll go ahead and clear this filter just so we can see what this looks like without a filter on. So you can see here that the state and program detail gives you a stacked bar chart color coded by the program and detailed by state with a total number of signs at the top. If you need to get detailed information about a specific agency, initiative, program, label, or state, you can go to the data detail page. In this section, I'm going to be reviewing how to export data from the data detail page. Here we are going to select a specific state. We're going to go down to Colorado because it has the most test cases, it's the most test data that's been submitted. You can see here that we have those same 5 filters that will apply to this table. You can see the initiative, agency, program, label, the borrower name, state, county, city, project address, the total investment amount, whether or not the project has been reported. Scrolling over, you can see additional data about the reports that have been submitted, whether or not signage was present, how many signs have been reported, whether or not it's been reimbursed, or whether the project is opted out, the date the signs were identified, and any comments that are applicable. In order to export the data, you'll see that once I select this scroll bar, these 4 icons will become visible. If you click on these 3 ellipses that say more options, left click there, you can export this data. So this will take the filters that have been applied. We're going to export the data with the current layout and click export. You can then change the test data, export, RD, signage, OH, and today's date is 07/10/2023. Go ahead and export this, save it to whatever file location and name you want, and then you'll be able to see when we open that it is available to be opened. Okay, so you can then see for Colorado, we have all of the records exported with the relevant, all of the columns that I just reviewed, and the data about the signage. So if you need to export data, you're able to do so using that method. Please note that if you click into this chart element and you then export the data, it's only going to export the record that you've selected. So what you want to do is you want to use these. You could select any of these up here, but what that will do is it will then sort. So if you don't want to sort it, if you do want to sort it, great. Go right ahead and sort it by whichever element matters to you. But if you don't want to sort it and you want to retrieve all of the elements from this, and you want to retrieve all the records from this element, my recommendation is to select the scroll button and then the 3 ellipses that are right above the top of the scroll button. Then that gives you the export data. With that concludes how to export data from the RD signage visualization tool. If you have any questions or technical difficulties with accessing the data or exporting, our email help desk box or email help box is listed at the bottom of the report. With that, that concludes my portion, and we will return to the rest of the run-of show. Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be sharing my screen.
Okay, for points of contact for the signage, the internal contacts for RD staff, there's a central point of contact that you can reach out to, and that is our state operations inbox. The management operations officers check that regularly and will facilitate a response. We can definitely answer questions regarding the reporting. And then if there's other questions specific to the program or signage requirements, we can certainly facilitate getting a response for those. There is a specific point of contact for the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program. It's Jeff Carpenter, and his email is listed here. Customers should contact their general field representative for the electric and telecom programs regarding the signage requirements. And for the AIG and MPPEP future round, we mentioned there's cooperators that are working with business programs. They should contact those cooperators for those programs. And then for all other covered programs, it would be the program staff out in the field that can answer questions for those customers. Next slide, please. And then some resources that have already been mentioned and demonstrated. There is the new RD Instruction 2006 TT, and there's a link to it here. And then also the SharePoint site that Carl demonstrated. The link to that is here, and that is where the reporting tool will be located, as well as other resources related to the signage. With that, I'll turn it back over to Michelle.
Thank you, Gail. That concludes our training portion of the presentation today. And now we would like to open it up to questions.
Hey, Gail. Yeah, we have a couple questions. I'm going to go ahead and ask the first one for you. Under the RD Instruction 2006 TT, up to 10K can be reimbursed for signage as project costs. Can the awardee charge for their staff's time to coordinate and install the signage?
Hey, Michelle.
Yes.
This is Jackie. And I think it would depend on whether or not that cost is an allowable cost under the program. At this point, this is really about the signage itself and not about staff time. But I think if the program under which it is awarded allows for that kind of a cost, talk to your program area, and I would think we would be able to cover it. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Yes.
Yes.
And Maggie, just so you know, I answered some things in the Q&A. You may want to just repeat the Q and the A as you go through.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and go over a couple of those right now. So there's one question that, Jackie has kindly answered for us, and it says the language on the sign, may need to be reviewed. The only entity who should claim they have supervised design is the architect of record or the engineer of record. The language that's used puts the agency at a perceived liability. And the language they're referring to is, let me see where they, design and construction supervised by USDA rule development. And the answer to that is yes, we understand that. And the style guidance is an OMB White House document. We have inquired with the department and OMB on whether or not we can modify this language. So please keep in mind, this is a work in progress and we are working on correcting some of these issues. So we'll go back to another question here. Are we going to provide a copy of this PowerPoint for folks to download? Michelle, is that something that we would be able to provide after the webinar today?
Yes, Maggie, we'll provide a copy of the PowerPoint on the SharePoint site where all the other resources are posted.
Perfect. Another question we have here is, will we be required to send letters to grantees who do not have any construction? We have many ERHC grants that are equipment and soft costs only.
Jackie,
Michelle, yeah. So one of the things we've done for you all, and Carl, you're on the line as well, right? We are filtering out. We're going through the data, and so we're trying to filter out all the equipment projects so they're not in the tracker for you. So you shouldn't see them if they're there, and it's equipment only. Most people won't need a sign for equipment, but there may be an entity that it's a large piece of equipment and they would like to have a sign, and they might want something, a small sign in a hospital saying they got this new equipment. That's fine if they want to participate, but you're not. We try to filter as many of the equipment projects out. We'll filter them out in the when we send the letters out as well. And Michelle, I saw that in the Q&A, our state director, Scott Soares, has asked a similar, in the same line of question about who will send out the letters and whether the GFRs can take the lead on letters. Do you want to speak to that?
so the GFRs will be taking the lead on sending letters for reconnect projects. For
an IRA, right?
Yeah, well, IRA funds were notified through the funding announcement, and then we'll receive information through their award documents. ERHC, we're anticipating that the field staff would email those letters to the awardees.
Scott Soares, does that answer your question?
And as a follow-up to that, Jackie, we have another question in there that's talking about ERHCs that were funded in fiscal years 21 and 22 for equipment and lost revenue reimbursements. They're already done and paid out. Would a letter need to be sent to them, or can we just report those as opt-out because the project is done?
Say that again. I'm sorry. I was answering Scott's other question in the chat.
That's okay. So and this is kind of a follow-up to what we were talking about with the questions. So for ERHC projects that were funded in 21 and 22, and they are for equipment and lost revenue reimbursement, those projects are done and already paid out. Would we need to send a letter, or can we just report in the tool opt out because the project is completed?
Yeah, you can do that. You do not need to send a letter for those.
Okay. And we have a couple of hands raised, so we'll go over to Frank. Frank, if you want to come off mute and ask a question. And to come off mute, you scroll your mouse across the bottom of your screen, and it's in the lower left-hand corner.
I'm okay. Must have hit it by accident.
Perfect, Frank. Go ahead. Okay, so then we'll go to Alex. Alex, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I actually don't have a question. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. All right, we will return to questions in the Q&A. And once again, everyone, if you want to ask your question verbally, please raise your hand, and then we can take you off mute and you can ask your question verbally, or if not, just put it into the Q&A. So for the next question we have here, how do we handle REAP grant applications that were just submitted for the 630 competition? Their budgets did not include funds for signs.
That's a really good question. And in those cases, I think that is a good question. I don't have a quick answer for that. Let us take that, and we will make sure that that gets out to everyone. I know what I instinctually want to do, right? But it may be that we have to follow up with them afterward, or during the final after you've determined who the awardees will be, speaking to them about whether or not they have room in that budget for signage and whether or not they want to participate in it. I think it's really, really important to reemphasize this is completely voluntary. So if they want to do a sign, great. If they don't want to do a sign, that's okay too. There's no, we'd like to encourage them to do it. And it could be, hopefully it's a small amount of money relative to their total project. But for Brian, for your question, it's a really good one. We may have to, for anyone who is a potential awardee, ask if they'd like to do signage, and if they do, you can offer them, if you have the money in the account to do that. So we'll loop back with RBCS on that and get you a final on that. Okay.
Thank you, Jackie. And we also have here, and this may relate to some of your comments there, we have, can you please clarify optional versus required? We have heard both during this presentation. I think, Jackie, you just kind of reiterated that this is optional, but you're asking for that. If you could go ahead and address that for us, please.
Yeah. It's all voluntary. There's no requirement to do this for our recipients. We are going to encourage them and in an effort to help their local community understand that those tax dollars came from these big investments that are being made. If they are excited about it and want to do it, great. If they don't want to do it, that's okay too. And our goal is to ask them, give them time to think about it, confirm with them, no judgment either way, and just log what's going to happen. And then once we know if they're doing a sign, if their plan is to do signage, and we do have applicants who do this all the time. I think we'll have ones who will welcome this and want to do it. Then we just need to track them and know where they are, so that if there are amplification events or other ways they want to highlight those, that the administration would like to highlight it, then that we have that information.
Perfect. And I'd like to go on to the next question here. It says the instructions link just takes you to the general area for instructions on the RD webpage. What part should we click on? And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then that way I can hopefully clear this up real quick in real time while we're doing this. So the general page that we went to was to this instructions page, and to get to the exact area that you're looking for, if you type in and you search for the 2006 TT, you can see it comes up here. Click on the plus, and then you can go to the PDF or the document. Hope that answers that question for everyone. And then we've got a few more questions in here. Are we required to physically go see the sign after it is installed, or can the borrower grantee send a photo to us? Travel time can be significant.
Yeah, you do not need to physically go verify. This is not an audit. If we would love it if they're willing to just take a snapshot of their sign and send it to you. You can send it to us. We'd be happy to have it, but it's not an audit. You don't need to look at it that way. We just don't want to provide information that there is a sign and there isn't one there. So we trust our recipients, and if they tell you there's a sign there and they send you a snapshot, that's great.
Perfect, thank you. Got another question here. Is there a standard cost for a small, medium-sized sign for a REAP project, for example? We're just trying to get a scale so that because it's surely not the full 10K.
Michelle, I'm going to punt to you on that because we talked a lot about this with the work group on cost of signage. We certainly don't expect people to spend $10,000 on a sign in a storefront window, right? On a small REAP project, right?
And I think what we've heard from past history is about $1,500 to $2,000 per sign. That $10,000 maximum is where we're looking at possibly a broadband project that goes over many miles, and there's several locations where it makes sense to post a sign. That would be where we would see the maximum dollar amount used. It just depends on the project.
Thank you, Michelle.
And keep in mind that initial $1,500 to $2,000 would be for a construction sign, Michelle. If it's a smaller sign, right, they should. The cost may differ if it's a smaller sign and it's outside of a or it's in a window, or it could be something just on their website that doesn't cost them anything. You know what I mean? So you'll have to gauge that when you're approving that. And I know there are questions about where's that money coming from. Most projects have a contingency in them. Our construction projects typically do. We're hoping it'll be able to be taken out of those funds for a project that's already underway. If not, and there are funds available and they want to seek an additional obligation for a small amount of money, I suppose they could, but the hope is that there'll be room in that project contingency budget to pick it up.
Yeah, Jackie, we actually have two that kind of go directly towards that. Where's the money coming from? And I'm going to kind of try to summarize them just to make sure that we answer these people's questions. So one of them is specifically asking for the example is if there's no money left from the project that or from the program that the project was funded, but they want a sign, where can we go for reimbursement? Can the state use their own dollars for that, or are there other funds available?
No. So if if there are no funds available in the program area and the project wants to do a sign, and they've fully expended every bit of their dollars, there's no leftover undispersed dollars, then it may be that they have to handle the cost of that. We don't have a separate administrative pot of money for those dollars. But right now we have, I mean, we're talking IRA, we're talking ARPA, we're talking bill. So in some of those cases, there may be program dollars available to handle it, and others, it may just be that if they want to do it and they're willing to do it, they'll have to cover that cost. I know that's not a great answer, but again, it's voluntary. They can say, nope, I don't want to cover the cost, so thanks, but no thanks, and that's okay too.
Okay. Then we also and I think we've touched on this, but I just want to make sure that that's hammered home and it's clear for our audience. For projects that have already been obligated, will additional funding be provided beyond what was initially obligated to cover signage costs?
So it really, I mean, it's a great question. If a project's already obligated and there is room in that budget, right? Sometimes things come in under bid. Sometimes and every large construction project has a contingency at RD. There's always some wiggle room. So we would hope that they'd be able to work it through that contingency. If there are program dollars available that they could come in for a subsequent obligation just to modify their deal to add signage, that's fine too. You'll have to work with your various program areas to get those additional dollars, but I would think it would just come through a subsequent obligation to them. For those who are applying fresh, they would just build it into their budget, right? A new application would build it in, and we're hoping to let them know that that's a possibility, right? That when they come in to apply that, and most of the future facing FOAs include language that says you can get reimbursed for it. So they build it into their budgets. It's not going to be a perfect system. This is kind of out of cycle for what we would normally do. So we understand it may seem a little kludgy, but if there's no dollars, there may not be dollars for signage there, and that's okay too.
Thank you, Jackie. We've got a couple more questions here. One is more on the logistical so that we can avoid duplicate contacts. Is it possible for someone to generate a target list for the state offices or for GFR projects out of the Power App so that then they would know who is contacting for which project?
So Michelle, we're doing the contacts by program, right?
Correct.
So for maybe we can identify in the Power App, I don't know, some way that just as a reminder of who's the lead on those. So for IRA, PACE, and New Era, and for they're being handled, and for Reconnect, they're being handled by the GFRs, right? You have that little grid, and then for other programs, they're being handled by the state representatives. Scott, we can talk about how we can identify them. Maybe there's a way we can signal in there. I'll talk to Carl and the team about how we can make it clear. But we could probably also, you can filter, is Carl on? I don't know if he made it back on. Anybody from our
not
data?
on, but you can filter by program.
Okay, so thanks, Jess. So we should be able to filter by program, and can they filter by state?
Yes, you can filter by state.
So maybe what we need to do is Scott, one of the things we were talking about doing is doing a little like mini videos. So maybe we'll do a mini video where we can show you how to just, for your state, just pull down a contact list that you're working from, and then you go into the, because it's going to be updated as obligations happen. We're just going to keep pumping through the obligation information into the tracker, the relevant obligation information. So you're going to, at some point, you'll need to filter it so that your list is refreshed. But if it will help to have a starter list, we can get you a starter list. Tell me what would be best for you all, to just have the little video that shows you how to filter so you can just pull down for your state. Does that make sense?
Jackie, while we wait for some responses in the Q&A, we are running up to the end of our training, and I just wanted to know, do you want me to keep going with questions, or where are we at with that? We want to address them offline.
I think if people are willing to stay on a few more minutes, I think we should answer as many questions as we can, if everybody's okay with that.
Perfect. And we do have Scott raising his hand, so maybe that can help provide some
Great.
clear. Scott, if you want to come off.
Yay, I'm able to come off mute. Thanks so much. Yeah, my fingers were getting kind of, I was typing a little bit more than I should. Anyway, for us, maybe it's a little unique because we're a 3-state jurisdiction. So I'm looking at a 3x3x3. If I look at it from what I'm seeing on the Power App by the utility, the different program areas, the different services. So it'd be most helpful for us if I had a list of which of those are responsibility to contact versus those that would be contacted by the GFRs. Because again, I just want to avoid any duplication so that it doesn't seem like we're urging them, if they've already been funded, they already have budgets, to pull money out. Because again, as I mentioned in the chat, we're seeing more in the way of cost overruns at this point for a number of projects. Many of these projects are coming back, seeking in some cases, funds for cost overruns. And that leads into another question that I put up there on when we see these cost overrun requests come back in, I will make them aware of the signage options, but do they also incorporate those costs as part of their cost overrun request at the same time?
They can. That is a great idea, Scott. Yes, you can put it there.
Thanks, Jackie.
All right, so we have a couple questions tied to the same topic here. One of the question is this signage combined with or in addition to the project construction sign that they've already used for years? Or can that be combined, added together?
I think it's meant to be a replacement for the traditional sign if they have not put up a sign already, right? If they have put up a sign already, if they're underway, and they want to have a second sign, we can do that as well.
Okay. And then we have another one here, just wanting to know for sure, will there be a sample letter provided for them to make contact with for different projects?
Michelle, I'm going to punt to you on that.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, we're working on sample letters right now, working with the program areas to finalize those, and then they will be sent out by the program areas for you to provide to the recipients.
All right, thank you, Michelle. We have one final question so far. Who will be sending out the letters for projects already that have been awarded?
So for electric and telecom, the GFRs will make that contact and send the letter out. For programs like ERHC, that will go out from the program director to the awardees.
Thank you, Michelle. And at this time, we don't have any other hands raised or any other questions in the Q&A.
There was one question in the Q&A that I answered in text and it disappeared, and I just wanted to bring it for attention. Brian asked, he'd done a search and he saw a project that was not in the programs that we talked about today. And I just wanted to highlight that, when we did the test data, we didn't filter all of them out, and we will be cleaning out the data that is in the Signage app before people start entering it. So you shouldn't see projects that that aren't in these programs.
And I believe I saw a specific question about MPILP, and that program was funded by Appropriations Act of 2021, Consolidated Appropriations Act. So we had not included that in the guidance.
Thank you, Michelle. And as a follow-up to our prior question about the sample letter, they're wanting to know if that sample letter can be sent via an email attachment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just want to, there were, in asking questions, or a lot of questions in the chat, they still call it a requirement. Just want to reiterate, I know it sounds like a broken record. It is not a requirement. It's voluntary. If our clients want to do it, great. If they don't want to do it, that's okay too. Not a hard push. It's not a requirement. It's just hey, this is an opportunity to amplify your project and let them know where the funds are coming from. And we'll fund it if we can. And right, so just it's voluntary. Everything's voluntary, not an audit, okay.
All right, thank you, Jackie. We have no more questions in the Q&A box, so I'll turn it back to you, Michelle.
All right, thank you, Maggie. So I want to thank everyone for your participation today, for your good questions. We will be posting a transcript of the training on the SharePoint site. We will also, as we discussed, provide a copy of the PowerPoint. You have your points of contact for further questions, and then we will also follow up on those items that we weren't able to answer today. And with that, we will go ahead and end our session today.
Thank you, everybody.